The frequency of severe storms and floods should be acting as a wake-up call. Apart from tackling climate change, a green economy would bring lots and lots of local jobs.
Disruptive climate change is the biggest threat to everything that we know. And we have a very short window of time in which to face up to delivering those transformations, not just talking about it.
Mae'r merchaid yn llawennu wrth weld y caeau'n glasu ac yn dwedyd daeth yr haf a thywydd braf I garu ond mae'r gwynt yn oer yn chwythu a'r awyr yn tywyllu a mi'n mynd drwy lwyn a ffos ar hyd y nos I garu
Local authorities have a duty to support the move towards a low-carbon society and, in particular, an obligation to facilitate the take-up of small and medium-scale renewable energy projects. Yet this isn't happening.
There's a timidity and an unwillingness on part of politicians to have real conversations with people in the valleys and other places in Wales about what it means to be both viable and sustainable.
In reality, I think that a lot of the UK debate has been wrongly focused. That isn't needing to plough through and past local objections to give permission for wind farms or fracking or whatever. It is the question about whether localities, A, have ownership of what is being proposed, and B, are the direct price beneficiaries of the gains that come out of it. And that's where other parts of the world are much further ahead. They understand that this is as much about the politics of energy and who owns it and to whom it's accountable as much as the technologies. There will be technology failures and there'll be technology successes, but the question will be who owns those and how will that ownership benefit those who are most vulnerable at the moment in terms of fuel poverty and in terms of climate disruption. And that's what the future generations, those are the questions the future generations will expect us to ask now.
So can localising energy production save local authorities and all of us money?
I've done a lot of work with communities in Germany, and the benefits of local energy generation can be seen because they are able not only to produce their own clean energy, but to have the first right to buy it back, and at prices that can be between 30 and 50% less than they're paying now. So you not only have a clean energy revolution, but a lower cost energy revolution. And the whole notion of security of supply also gets changed because people in every community that you visit understand that they deliver their own security. There's a cascade of benefits. First of all, you get local jobs. Then you get local connections from electricity to heat and to power and to transport. And some of this is really exciting because in Sweden they're using the energy from waste to power their bus and public transport vehicles. In Germany they're using it in different communities to collect solar and put it into the charging of electric vehicles. So this whole panoply of gains starts to spill back over into the local and the national economy. And the Germans are really clear, far from this being a cost, when you look at the fact that people who are employed in this process are local, and they pay taxes on their wages locally, and they shop in shops locally, and they pay VAT on all the money go round, put the money and the jobs and the skills back into local sustainable communities. So you get communities supported long term in an energy sourcing that is also long term.
So, how healthy is community energy generation in Wales?
We started 17 years ago in response to a UN environmental summit and had the idea of developing a community wind farm because we wanted to reduce our local carbon emissions and also help fund future work on sort of low carbon activity in this area.
My view is local authorities aren't encouraging it to happen at all. In our case, the Economic Regeneration Department were excellent. They understood exactly what we were trying to do. The Parks Department understood exactly what we were trying to do, as did planning. The problem we had, and I think this is, talking to other groups has been similar, is that the Estates and Legal Services departments of local authorities, one, don't understand what social enterprises are. They have no idea what a social enterprise is. So they don't know whether to treat you like a public sector organisation or a private business in terms of negotiating with you. They don't understand how the costs of or any renewable energy scheme work, or the benefits. And for an example, it took us 3.5 years to get a lease agreed with a local authority, which is completely absurd. 6 months would have been acceptable. 3.5 years, just, I don't know, smacks of incompetence to me. But
there doesn't seem to be joined up thinking between local authorities and national policies on this, particularly in Wales. And for generations and generations, profit has gone out of local areas, like particularly remote rural areas. Profit and talent has gone out of those areas. So this is an opportunity actually to halt that process and keep that wealth in the local area.
We've looked at the community energy generation in a number of contexts, across a number of technologies, and one or two interesting things emerge, largely based on the ownership model. And I started out by thinking this would be about community versus commercial, but actually I think it's more about local versus non-local. And what we found is that locally based entities, commercial as well as community, tend to buy more things locally. They tend to have more well-developed relationships along the supply chain, so they have higher trust relationships with their suppliers. They are prepared to work in partnership with their suppliers, developers, construction companies, surveyors and so on, much more than you find with inward coming capital energy development. And so what you get is what we in economics would call a cluster. There's a real community energy cluster in Wales, but it's very small, it's very fragile, and it relies on a handful of key individuals. The behaviours that we see in that, the kind of the learning, the partnership, the innovation in kind of technology and techniques is really interesting and really worth nurturing.
Now we have the opportunity to wrench the current energy system out of the grip of a dysfunctional cartel and turn it back into an energy democracy that is also a sustainable energy democracy.
We have an emerging community energy network in Wales. We went to visit a small renewable energy cluster near Porthcawl. We visit the site at Cennin.
Park Stormy has been created as an energy cluster to create business and much needed jobs and economic benefits in Wales. It's come out of the excellent work done in Austria, in Goosing, where very deprived areas realised that by making their own energy they can create a lot of economic benefit and much needed jobs. And I'm from a rural background. We use three worlds worth of resources. We have to live within the cycle. We have to better reuse things, and we can create economic activity out of nothing. This was a very rundown site here at Park Stormy, an old airfield that was disused. Last year we saved 60,000 tonnes of carbon. We're well on the way to creating 50 sustainable jobs. And the only things we take in are unused materials, organic and mineral, that we tipped away, and we enhance wind and we can create things for local people. And it's about lots of little people like us doing it and repeating this, and it's the models are there to use, and it's important for local people to get good long-term benefits out of it.
I think the key thing in terms of community ownership models, cooperative models, social enterprise models that one has to remember is it's always about people first, legal structure second. Okay, so if you have an engaged, proactive, well-qualified and experienced person within a community who wants to do something, they will find an appropriate structure to do that in.
It's a lot of hard work. It's a huge amount of hard work, and you have to be committed to it. You also have to be stroppy. You won't get a scheme like this built if you just lie down on your back as soon as things go wrong. You have got to fight, and you have to be awkward. You have to be one of those kind of people or that kind of group that is willing to just be knocked down and get back up again and just keep going.
Partnerships are very important. We've had a range of them. If you can get the local authority on board, it makes life a lot easier. But I think because of the impacts of climate change, and also there being more schemes out there, so people just are thinking, yeah, we could do this, and there's just more and more momentum behind the whole sector now.
What should we be expecting then from Welsh and UK governments, and especially local authorities?
The real challenge for Wales is to pick all the best examples of what is already being done in other parts of Europe and North America. In Germany, you now have over 190 local authorities that have taken the grid back into local ownership, where they are selling themselves less consumption, energy saving, energy efficiency in people's homes, rather than more consumption. In Denmark, they are much further ahead in the social ownership of community wind turbines and the right of local supply at lower costs. In North America, you have states that can mandate that the grid uses increasing amounts of clean energy, it supplies energy saving rather than more consumption, and it cuts carbon emissions at 5% a year or whatever. What Wales needs is leadership, and leadership that goes into 4 key areas. First of all, the right of local supply, the ability to ensure that local communities that are generating their own clean energy are the beneficiaries of that. Then Wales needs to have a much greater control over how its grid works. National Grid and Ofgem haven't a clue about how the Welsh grid works, and nor do they have an interest. And so the right to have greater control of how the grids work in Wales is the second point. The third is that Wales also has to be brave enough to demand the right to have greater duties. And many countries in Europe are already setting much higher standards of expectations. In France, you can no longer build a commercial building that doesn't have a solar roof or a nature-friendly roof. In Denmark, you can't get planning permission even considered for a building that is dependent on fossil fuels. And so the right to set carbon and climate obligations upon ourselves then drives a determination to find answers that meet those higher expectations. And the same applies to the existing buildings. That is the fourth point. That the low-hanging fruit in all this is energy efficiency in the buildings that we've got. And to force the grid and to force localities to have energy saving as the starting point.
In a perfect world, I would see not only local communities, but poor local communities being in charge of owning, controlling the sort of energy infrastructure we're talking about, that requires a completely different energy system than the one we have now. So I think in the short term, the opportunity is for pilot projects, beacon projects, pathfinders, case studies.
Well, job creation is very important. I mean, the value of job creation, over 80% of the people who work here live within the 10-mile radius. Several people, even one of our skilled graduates, couldn't find work, having taken a higher level degree. He now works here as one of our research team, working on international projects. Those opportunities are few and far between in Wales. Mid 2016, we hope to turn on quite a large scale anaerobic digester to take a lot of the food waste. We're hoping, and we've signed contracts to have one of the largest battery storage units in Wales. We're hoping to have a hydrogen refueling station. We're aiming to put some small units here to allow people to bring their bright ideas to market. We're also looking at a technium so our universities can study here, because this is about trying to integrate learning, and we want to share what we've learned with other people, because the lovely thing about renewable energy, it's not an exclusive club and everybody can join it.
I still think in ways we can identify key communities, key individuals, key technology mixes, not just solar PV, not just hydro, not just wind, but mixes of different technologies with local, potentially local customers as well, to see how this stuff might work. We can look at communities collaborating to bring together different generation technologies at a larger scale, and then maybe selling into these markets a bit more proactively than they are now. But I think certainly for the next 5 years, it's going to be quite small and quite a difficult place to be.
I've been saying to people in the Welsh Assembly, in the Westminster Parliament, and in local authorities around the country, first of all, they've got to get out more. Second, wake up and smell the coffee, because these are changes that are already happening internationally. There is a movement of smart towns and smart cities and smart regions that are already committed to becoming 100% renewable energy in their focus. And they just develop along that path with new partners. Some of those partners may be the insurance industry, others may be the telecommunications industry. Certainly they will be local communities, and they will probably be pension funds. In Germany, you even have some of the local grids owned by energy co-ops. And we've got to be thinking on the same scale.
I think the role of the Assembly, currently at least, in transforming energy supply structures has to be in pump priming innovative approaches, and probably quite small scale approaches. We're probably talking about individual projects in parts of Wales where there's an engaged community, there's a strong renewable resource, and there is potentially a set of customers, consumers who could engage with that, maybe prepared to pay a little bit more in the absence of fits for that power. And again, it's a role for the Welsh Government to tell local authorities it's their responsibility to engage with the communities and give them resources, give them autonomy, not to kind of gatekeep and hold this stuff back.
What we need is the leadership and the courage to grab hold of a current energy system which is dysfunctional, corrupt and unsustainable, and shake it by the scruff of the neck, turn it upside down and make it sustainable, accountable, and to be able to dance more lightly in and with the future. Never, I think, has there been such a moment, and never have I known somewhere that has the resources that Wales has to put itself in the camp of the leaders. If it isn't, it will only because not enough of us have found the courage to step forward and be that.
Mae'r merchaid yn llawenu wrth weld y caean glasu, ac yn dwedyd daeth yr haf a thywydd braf I garu. Ond mae'r gwynt yn oer yn chwythu a'r awyr yn tywyllu, a mi'n mynd drwy lwyn a ffos ar hyd y nos I garu. Mae'r gwyntoedd yn gostegu, mae pawb yn mynd i gysgu, mae mab yn disgwyl yn y llwyn, ac at yn fwyn lygeiti.